Hi, my name is Leah Schutz, and I'm a multidisciplinary design major. The visual strategy I decided to focus on is system diagramming because this is one of the most commonly used forms of visual rhetoric that I use in my schooling. So the way I've defined system diagramming as a designer is system diagramming is a beneficial way to visually show the relation between complex parts within a system in order to clarify the intent or existing organization of a system as well as form intent through new findings. I have used system diagramming as a way to show exchange and interaction between different parts of a system. So to distill that down, basically system diagramming is just a way to piece together a narrative of a system in a way that's kind of mappable as a diagram. And this has been helpful to me because it can help me explain the intention of the system I'm creating, or it can also help me find the intention if I'm not quite sure yet what it is or what parts I'm missing. So I did a little bit more research, of course, into system diagramming for this project. At the start of this project, I knew little about system diagramming for other disciplines or even more technical knowledge for the system diagramming I have done. And through my research, I learned that one of the commonly used system diagrams among different disciplines is called causal loop diagramming. So I have a few definitions here for causal loop diagramming. The first one is a visual representation of key variables, factors, issues, processes, and how they are interconnected. And the second one is a causal loop diagram consists of four basic elements: the variables, the links between them, the signs on the links, which show how the variables are interconnected, and the sign of the loop, which shows what type of behavior the system will produce. So this is really similar to diagramming I do, but it's a little bit more structured in the form that it's done with words and arrows and then loops that predict behavior, whereas a lot of the diagramming I have done has been more step by step, showing progression of a system. So here's an example of causal loop diagramming, talking about the complexities of COVID. So you can see here there are a few different sections. It talks about economic effects, environmental effects, health effects, and social effects, and then the interventions within them. And it shows the way that all these different things are interconnected. So this kind of shows how important causal loop diagramming is, because even though this is really complex to interpret, you can really see the interconnections between each part of this system. And here is another one about food safety and sustainable livestock and poultry production. You can see a lot of color coding, a lot of that looping. So there's a lot of different groupings, and then those arrows that show the interconnections between the groupings and the subgroupings. This third one is about workshops and workspaces. So as you can see, they all have different colors as well as arrows and loops showing the different interactions between different parts of the system. So my claim here is that system diagramming is a beneficial way to visually show the relation between complex parts within a system in order to clarify the intent or existing organization of a system, as well as form the intent through new findings. A personal example from my work is one of my studio projects about a year ago. I created a game called Echelon, and the game was based on the social structures of geese within their flocks and their behavior. And the game was made for high school students who have differing levels of social capabilities and how they can get to know each other better. So I came up with the idea of this board game, but it was really hard for me to figure out the rules. So I started creating some diagrams to figure out how each play would affect the next play. You can see here I started with this kind of smaller one, and then that was just one subcategory of the final one. This is also still a draft, but it's just showing different phases of this game. So there were multiple different phases of the game, lots of different plays or options, and I had a really hard time figuring out how to explain it in instructions, as well as just what play should lead to what thing and how to actually form the structure and interactions of this game. So these are my 2 drafts of the system diagram for Echelon, and here is the final. I separated it into 3 subsections. The first one is prepare for migration, just talking about answering cards in preparation until they remember the answers and feel ready to begin. This next phase is initiate migration. At this point, the players have the opportunity to go back into the preparation phase if they don't feel ready to start the migration, or they can go forward rolling the die to see who starts as the echelon leader. And then in this phase, it goes into the migration phase, which shows just the way that they interact with the board now. At first, it was only with the cards, but now the board comes in. So over here you can see it. It describes if you land on a yellow or a pink square, what your action will be. Then your next action, whether you get the correct answer or not, and then the different options that can come from that. And then moving ahead. And this just repeats this stage until it reaches the very end. So here is a few pictures of my game. Here are the cards and some people playing the game. Creating that system diagram really helped me figure out the purpose of what my game was, which relates back to my claim that it can help, system diagrams can help find intent. So I did some other research on causal loop diagrams and how they're used. This was the example I found that I thought was the most interesting, and it was a study looking at the effect of street trees on mental health, and they used causal loop diagrams to find pathways showing both positive and negative effects relating to this complex system. So here's a quote here describing what they found. Using this detailed causal loop diagram, we identified 20 interconnected pathways through which trees may have a beneficial effect on mental health. We categorized these broadly based on the 3 domains of the pathways by which nature contributes to health, as identified by Markovic as either first, reducing harm, second, restoring capacities, third, building capacities. We also identified at least 8 pathways through which street trees may have a negative impact on mental health. We categorize these broadly, considering the inverse of the domains identified by Markovic. So it's really interesting to see that they used the causal loop diagram to find these interconnected pathways between different parts of the system to then lead them to these 20 positive connections and 8 negative connections. So here's some of the causal loop diagrams that they did. You can see all the different factors such as physical activity, cognitive performance, dysfunctional behavior, and then the way that they're all interacting with each other. So here is a final system diagram that I did for a different project. It's showing the interconnected nature of 6 different interventions that I did. My goal with this project was to start conversation, and I was doing that through multiple different ways. These ones right here are surveys, zines, quilting bees, installations, postcards, and videos. And I wanted to show the way these interact with each other and the way they interact with the community. Specifically, I want to show what is being given to the community and what the community is giving in return. So as you can see, this is pretty complex and kind of messy and hard to read. But I've started editing this to be a little bit more formatted like a causal loop diagram. And of course, I am still not an expert at causal loop diagrams. I've come at it from a design perspective, whereas that's a system thinking perspective, which I still don't know as much about. However, I've been trying to make some efforts to improve this diagram through my findings about causal loop diagrams. So here you can see I've kind of changed it up. Instead of these color-coded circles of what the community gives or the community receives, I've changed it to these colors of what the community receives on the left and what the community gives on the right. And then using just words and arrows and colors, I've kind of charted out the interactions. You can see there are 2 interventions here where the community both gives and receives, and then all of the other ones are just one or the other. So in the pink, it shows what the community receives. In the green, it shows what the community gives. And the black is showing all the interactions between the 2. So you can see what things are informing the next. For example, the zines have informed the video. The video had imagery from the zines and words from the zines in them. The quilting bee as well informed the video with audio recordings, and the survey informed the zine. So I had words from my survey in the zine. So you can kind of see how those interactions all interplay. To really make this a causal loop diagram, I'd have to dive into the positive and negative aspects and indicate those, as well as probably distilling it down a little bit more so that there are less of these overlapping arrows and more just smaller loops within. But this is my attempt to start working toward a causal loop diagram within this system diagram that I had started. Throughout this project, I've learned a lot more about system diagramming, specifically causal loop diagramming. System diagramming is a very good way to find and show the interconnection of different parts of a system. I will continue to use what I've learned about causal loop diagrams as I go forward with my design process. Thank you!